Cover 2 with Blaine Bishop and Zach Lyons here at 105 The Zone, powered by all Four Seasons Garage Stores, 615-737-1045. Arkansas is playing South Carolina here at the SEC basketball tournament down here at downtown Nashville, here at Bridgestone Arena, where Arkansas currently leads 57-43 with 14 minutes and 36 seconds left in the second half, according to my ESPN app, which is always delayed. But what's not delayed is that Tennessee Titans in free agency have signed both Dan Moore and Van Jefferson, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're on the phone now with Nick Farabaugh. You can follow him on Twitter at FarabaughFB. He's the Steelers beat reporter for PennLive.com and host of Steelers Breakdown, also on the Penn Live YouTube channel. Nick, I just want to start out and say, what the heck are y'all doing at quarterback?
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah.
It's like the
oh my.
It's like the wheels are turning again. Every single year, it somehow just becomes a new adventure. Either it's old Ben Roethlisberger, it's the adventures of Kenny Pickett, it's Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and now apparently it's maybe Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. It's quarterback purgatory, and they're just throwing darts at the wheel every different year, man. What a crazy offseason this has been for them at the quarterback position.
I mean, so with Russell Wilson, I find it so interesting because they've obviously lost out on Justin Fields, who's with the New York Jets. But when the Tennessee Titans signed Dan Moore, all we heard about was that Russell Wilson is the reason for his high sack problem, which is a conversation for later on. But if that is the case, and you guys went 6-5 down the stretch with Russell Wilson, and he's an issue on that offense in terms of sacks and pressures, why would you all even entertain bringing him back? Is it just out of desperation at that point?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the only options to bring him back. Now, listen, Russ also kind of on his way out, as Russ does, rub people the wrong way. So there's more than just the on-field stuff. The off-the-field stuff isn't even perfect either. So Russ is the reason they're bringing Russ back is just because he also kind of fits what they do, I guess, right? DK Metcalf, George Pickens. You can build the whole offense out of moon balls for, I guess, a few weeks if you really wanted to. But it's desperation, man. They are desperate at that quarterback spot. They don't like the draft option, so they're not going to make some desperate trade up to go get Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart or whatever. Even if they fall to 21, I don't think they're really going to pick them. So it's kind of like, who's going to bridge the gap here? They wanted that to be Justin Fields. They got outbid by the Jets, and so now it's Rodgers or Russ, and that's kind of where they're at. It is a desperation pull by the Steelers, but they're going to try and do their best this year. We'll see what goes on, but it is not a good spot to be in at quarterback.
So it says in your Twitter bio that you're an offensive line enthusiast. The Tennessee Titans have signed Dan Moore, where there's $50 million guaranteed paid out in the first 2 years of his contract, but he's getting paid over $80 million over a course of 4 years. I went back through your tweets and wanted to see what you thought about him during games. And there was a tweet where you said that over the last 2 months, this was during the last Cincinnati game where he was getting beat by Trey Hendrickson, but you said Trey Hendrickson is a great player, but he has regressed over the last 2 months of the season. What is your overall? And I don't really care about run blocking at this point, and I know that's a major pro with him. But in terms of pass blocking with Dan Moore, what do you give for the reason that his play declined over the back half of the season last year?
It's really fascinating because in the first half of the year, he appeared to be pretty technically proficient. It looked like he had taken a step. He got stronger over the offseason. I think that was a big part of it. So he was anchoring more consistently. He lets guys get into his chest. He plays with wide hands, but the hands weren't becoming as wide. He was getting good punch timing, getting inside, playing with solid pad level. And then in the second half of the year, he faced a tougher slate of pass rushers. Faced Myles Garrett, of course, in there twice. Trey Hendrickson twice. He faced those Ravens edge rushers, Odafe Owe, Kyle Van Noy, and it just went off the deep end. The hands became sloppy. He got outside and wide and allowed guys into his chest and just got bullied back. He stopped anchoring on power rushes, and then he started oversetting and allowing the inside or the outside window to get open. His hips were never kind of in line with the rest of his body, so sometimes he was a waist bender and got bent forward and got beat real clean. On a lot of the real clean reps, happens is he gets too aggressive and tries to vertically set and get really way up on those edge rushers, and it can go real ugly. The Steelers like to do that with him because when he's kind of patient, he's more of a body catcher than an aggressor. He doesn't really get his full length out there, and he has the length to do it, but he kind of alligator on it sometimes. So they said, go be aggressive, go up there, but it resulted in some real ugly reps. Early in the season, he had consistency there, but it really just fell off quite quickly when you got to the premier edge rushers. My guess is it's probably those premier edge rushers, guys like Hendrickson and Garrett, all those really good players getting the tape on him and starting to realize what he was doing to try to mitigate his weaknesses and coming up with counters on him. You saw them kind of swat those hands down, get him overextending, and then at that point, he was kind of crawling back into his hole and going back into the usual deeper sets, but he was oversetting at times, undersetting, allowing the outside gate to be open. So there's a lot that went wrong there with Dan Moore. It was kind of like a domino effect. One thing went wrong, and then it just kind of all fell apart.
Has that been his MO throughout his entire career there? I mean, he's been there since he's been a fourth-round pick. He's played a lot of snaps for you guys over the years. Has that been his MO, and is that why they've kind of tried to find tackles in the first round to try to replace him because he does show that lack of consistency or that burnout towards the end of the season?
I wouldn't say he burned out towards the end of the year. This was kind of a one-year phenomenon. Throughout the rest of his career, I would say he's been pretty consistently below average. I think that's what I would say. And yes, that's why they've drafted Broderick Jones and Troy Falconu. And because, listen, Dan Moore just hasn't been the answer to them. He hasn't been a consistent pass protector. You know, you talk about the run blocking. He has been a plus there for them. But his consistency has been all up and down. You know, he's a high-character football player. He'll work really hard. So he's improved steadily a little bit over his career. But it has never come together to make him anything more than just what I would consider a fine spot starter, a fine guy that you can kind of call up in a time and moment. He's not going to be a top-flight tackle for you, in my opinion. That's why they moved on from him. This lack of consistency, these clean losses that he would experience throughout his career became a real problem. And so that is exactly why they've invested so heavily in the offensive tackle position.
So when it was announced that he's getting $50 million over the first 2 years, the instant reaction from Pittsburgh Steelers analysts, fans in the city is what?
I think everybody was a little shocked, to say the least. We did not, Steelers fans, Steelers beat writers, everybody knew what Dan Moore was. At best, when he is playing at his best, he's an average tackle. That's what he is. He can hold up and he can be fine for you, but this is not a needle mover. I mean, so to give him $20 million, I mean, he got more than Ronnie Stanley. I know Ronnie Stanley had $24 million offers out there, but that is crazy. And so I just think, this is a move where if you're trying to get competency at a tackle position, he can bring it at times, but he's not going to bring it all the time. It's probably going to be one of those deals where I think you're going to look back on it and say, man, what was going on there? The only good thing I can say is he has improved. He's a diligent worker. He's gotten better since his rookie year every year. His last year, the sack numbers were up, but I thought it was his best year of his career. So maybe he can continue on that trajectory. But man, it was a bit of a shocking twist, to say the least, to see him get that much money.
We're on with Nick Farabaugh, Steelers beat reporter for PennLive.com, offensive line enthusiast and host of Steelers Breakdown.
Well, Nick, thanks for coming on, man. First and foremost, Arthur Smith, the OC, was a former OC here with the Titans at one point in time, and I'd love to hear how you guys view his offensive scheme and system and what changes does he need to make, or do you guys think he needs to make to be successful next season?
Yeah, I mean, Arthur Smith has been a fascinating offensive coordinator. I think he could use a better scheme to fit to his players. I thought this year he kind of tried to fit Najee Harris into a wide zone scheme, and they didn't really put a lot of gaps up. I'd like to see a more modernized run scheme. You look at guys like Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, Ben Johnson, really successful run offensive coordinators, really mixing in a lot of gaps. I would like to see that more. Jalen Warren's very good at that too. The Steelers have an athletic offensive line, but they also have a really good pulling offensive line with the guys they invest in. So I would like to see that. I thought the biggest thing with him I thought he brought a new twist to the Steelers, having condensed formations, having more motion in his offense. But the drop back passing game was definitely catered to Russell Wilson, so we'll see. I think a lot of the Arthur Smith staples that you guys might be familiar with in Tennessee, you may not have seen last year because it was very kind of put into what Russell Wilson likes. So I would like to see him kind of bring some of that back if they can get. If Aaron Rodgers is there, for example, I think that they could bring some of that back, some of their more dynamic play-action concepts, because the play-action game was really just rollouts and kind of cut the field in half, two deep route combinations. I'd like to see a more diverse kind of out there on the play-action thing, and then play sequencing. I'd like to see more early down passing this year, if they can do that. Because they will have wide receiver talent. They will have passing game talent this year with DK Metcalf now coming in, and they're probably not done at wide receiver. So I think his scheme is more modernized than someone like Matt Canada's was. How could it not be? But there are things that he can definitely tweak, and I'd like to see him fit it to the personnel a little more this upcoming season.
Talk a little bit about Arthur Smith, and we saw a lot of this on social media and guys there in Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields' relationship with Arthur Smith. How did you view their relationships with those quarterbacks?
Yeah, I thought Arthur Smith's relationship with Justin Fields was great. I thought he loved having that quarterback run game design part of it. He became very heavily reliant on the QB run game whenever Marcus Mariota was there in Atlanta, and he really just transferred that to Justin Fields. But with Russell Wilson, obviously that was gone. Arthur Smith and I think Russell Wilson definitely had a strained relationship. I think, Arthur Smith's a very, I want you to do things in structure. I want you to kind of hit this read, and just do it as it's drawn up on the playbook. You know how Russell Wilson is. He's a little bit of a backyard football guy. He runs around, tries to make plays. Can't do it as much anymore because now he's 36. And so that kind of got them into some really sticky situations and third and longs. And I think that strained the relationship. Eventually, when Russ just started falling off on the deep ball side of things, the moon balls, they really shortened the playbook, and they took away Russell Wilson's ability to do things at the line, hot route, and change play calls. He could still do things like hand calls that are built into the play call or change protections, but he didn't have the veteran's freedom that you would expect someone like Russell Wilson to have, and that really hit their relationship, I think, hard. I think, you asked Arthur Smith, he probably would have had Justin Fields out there for most of last season. So I really do think that is where that went. And so Arthur Smith and Justin Fields had a great relationship. I think he loved working with Justin Fields. With Russell Wilson, though, I think he felt his scheme was limited and his options were limited.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We're on Nick Farabaugh. Now, Nick, that covers the Pittsburgh Steelers. Have to ask you, they signed Metcalf. That seems awesome. Great player, awesome athlete. But, man, how does that affect Pickens? Because I don't know either one of these guys, but they play very emotional and at wide receiver, and that can be very damaging to the quarterback. How do you see in that working there with the way that the Steelers operate with their head coach Tomlin?
A real quick follow-up question. Who will have the most penalties between the two?
That's a crazy question because I think since 2021, these are 1 and 2 in penalties for wide receivers, which is crazy. Yeah, it is a tough needle to thread. They are emotional, but Mike Tomlin is no stranger to emotional at wide receiver. Look at the draft history for the Steelers, and you look at their semi-good wide receivers they drafted. Who is the last one that you're like, that's a normal guy? Just like a normal, no-maintenance guy. I mean, they just go for these types of receivers. The emotional side of it is something Mike Tomlin manages. I mean, I could see Pickens getting traded. I don't think that's crazy to think about, considering how much of a kind of high maintenance player he's been. He's been late to meetings. He's been late. He was late to the Chiefs game Christmas Day. They're not going to pay him this offseason. And if you can't pay George Pickens, I think that could get really ugly. This could be this offseason's Brandon Ayuk situation where he's holding it in and things get real ugly. So would not be surprised there if that happened. But if they stay together, I mean, they're going to have to try and feed these guys targets, just deep balls, just go balls, 9 routes, different things like that. It's going to be tough. They're dangerous on paper. Theoretically, you force the teams into too high and force them to respect the deep ball, and then you can run the ball. It sounds great, but when you have these two emotional players, these two guys that want theirs, it can get pretty tough.
And lastly, just staying with the receivers, homegrown player here from Nashville. hasn't reached the heights that you expected from Justin Jefferson there. What was he like there? I saw his numbers. He continues to kind of go down since his time with the Rams, but they signed him to a modest contract, 1-year deal. What was he like there? Very good guy, but what did you think of him as a player? Did he have any impact, do you think?
I'm going back to one thing. I forgot to answer who will get the most penalties. It'd be Metcalf is my guess.
Well, that's just because you think Pickens is going to hold in.
Yeah. I mean, DK is even crazier than George sometimes on the field.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I do think so. George is crazy when he gets to the sideline. When I knew Van Jefferson, super high character guy. He does the dirty work. He became a really good blocker this year. Kind of didn't come in with that reputation. He started to really dig out guys in the run game and do a lot of dirty work things that maybe don't show up on the stat sheet. I think that's a plus. As a pure receiver, though, he doesn't really run great routes. That was kind of his thing. But he's kind of lost a step, whether it was injuries or whatever. He's not got the same pure speed that he had with the Rams, where he was this kind of deep threat that could win down the field. He's more of a kind of gritty catcher against zone coverage. He's very smart, so he can settle down in zones. He can work inside or outside, so he has some versatility in terms of alignment. But when you're looking at Van Jefferson, this guy is very much a wide receiver 4 or 5 skill set that can do some dirty work things for you. The blocking, he's got good hands. I think that's a thing. So he's a reliable receiver. When you throw him the ball, he will catch it. He's very tough. He's a very reliable player. He's a high character guy, so he'll be good in the locker room. But if you're expecting this guy to even give you 500 receiving yards, I think that's ambitious. He was cast into the wide receiver 2 role for the Steelers last year, quickly passed up by Calvin Austin III.
My boy from Memphis, by the way.
Yeah, Memphis guys, man. And Steelers love themselves some Memphis guys. Calvin passed him up quickly. He even got passed up once Mike Williams came in. Mike Williams only played 15 snaps per game, but made far more plays his limited chances. So I think Van Jefferson can be a quality depth add, but if he's in the wide receiver 2 mix, I think there's a problem.
Yeah, and I might have said Justin Jefferson. I want to make sure I said Van Jefferson. Sorry about that. Now, T.J. Watt, he got some injuries last year. How much does he kind of hurt the defense when he's not out there? How much is revolved around, his skill set being a special player, Hall of Fame type player?
Everything is on tap with TJ. I think he's the big thing, but they didn't move him around at all last year. I don't know how much, you can expect him to go off when he's lining up wide, knocking over the right tackle, and guys are running condensed splits to him. They're chipping him, and they're shifting the alignments to him. So he was getting, chipped, hit with the kind of stock block right off the line, and then getting double teamed sometimes. Like, that was the attention he was getting. It was insane. It's not like the Steelers didn't have other players. I mean, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton are all extremely good players. But T.J. Watt was just not moving around. So they didn't do the things that, you see other star edge rushers doing. Like, you see Myles Garrett lining up over the A gap or the B gap, switching sides even, right? He wouldn't go to the left tackle side at all. So that's a big part of it. But everything works around what T.J. Watt does. If he's having a great game, he's the guy that steps up in those big moments. He's the guy that gets the forced fumble when the Steelers need it. When the momentum's going the other way, he gets that key sack. He is that guy. And some injuries kind of came up last year. He had that pretty bad ankle injury against the Eagles and battled that. He had a thumb injury that hurt him too. So the injuries definitely hurt him. But the amount of attention he was getting last year, there's got to be an evolution in his game. He's been a speed rusher for a long, long time. He's 30. He's got to get back to kind of getting deeper in his bag. He has them in his bag. He's just been able to win with one method throughout his career. Teams are starting to kind of give him curveballs now. I think this is going to be the offseason of evolution for T.J. Watt.
I just want just a quick question. In practice, Dan Moore Jr. versus T.J. Watt, how did that look over these last 4 years? Did it look bad, or did it look like, he'll be okay?
Well,
I know it's practice.
As I said, they didn't really face much because TJ only rushed over the right tackle, and Dan doesn't like playing right tackle. When Dan played right tackle, it didn't look very good.
Okay.
TJ, even when he went to the left side, routinely won that. Dan Moore in training camp when he faced Alex Highsmith, who's another really good edge rusher, did have competitive reps, but I'd say Highsmith won more of those. Even Nick Herbig, who's the Steelers' kind of superstar little speed rusher, I would say got the better of Dan Moore. I think it definitely looked like Dan Moore was not on the caliber level of a T.J. Watt. throughout his time in Pittsburgh.
Just real quick, I know that we got, with Dan Moore, a lot of people think, okay, well, he was average at his best, but now he's coming with Bill Callahan over here to the Tennessee Titans, and maybe he can work on all the techniques that you kind of summed up at the top of your segment. But here's my question. What is the reputation of the Steelers' offensive line coach? I mean, probably most people in Tennessee don't know who he is. What's his reputation? I mean, is he high regarded? Is he a great teacher? Because that matters, or if he's been the same guy that's been there for Dan Moore for 4 years.
Yeah, Pat Meyer is I would call not highly regarded. They kind of move guys around and play them at different positions that they're maybe not comfortable at. Now, Dan Moore is most comfortable at left tackle, so that wasn't the case with him. But there's also kind of mixed results with it. Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick came in and had really good rookie years. Dan Moore has improved steadily over time, but I would not call, for example, Bill Callahan, who is obviously thought of as one of the best O-line coaches in the NFL. He's certainly no Jeff Stoutland or no Bill Callahan. I would say he's probably a middle tier, lower to the pack as well, offensive line coach. So certainly I think if you get with a top-tier offensive line coach, I think there could be reasons for upside with Dan Moore. He's got the physical nature to do it. He's got the demeanor, the coachability to do it. And again, if he can get his hands right, I think he could be a solid starter. We'll see where that goes. But for right now, his ceiling has just been average. And I do think Pat Meyer's inability to kind of get that out of him has been a big part of that.
See, I was able to find some positive about Dan Moore throughout this conversation. It took us a while, but I got there. Nick Farabaugh, Steelers beat reporter for PennLive.com and host of Steelers Breakdown and offensive line enthusiast. We appreciate your time, Nick.
Yeah. Thanks Nick.
All right, thanks. When we come back, we'll break down what he had to say. We'll talk about NWI choosing Miami over Tennessee. This is Cover 2 with Blaine Bishop and Zach Lyons here on 105 The Zone.